Now, thank you so much. First, let me thank the organizers of this workshop for their invitation, which enables us to share on this presentation. Yes, as you have been told, I'm the current editor-in-chief of Thought and Practice, a journal of the Philosophical Association of Kenya. This journal, Thought and Practice, was established in 1973 by the Kenyan philosopher. Some of you may not know him, some of you know him very well, H. Odera Oruka. Oruka was also the founder of the Philosophical Association of Kenya, which was established in, actually, 1973. Thought and Practice first published in 1974, a year after. And some background is important because H. Odera Oruka was the first black Kenyan trained in philosophy and to teach in a university in Kenya. Actually, there were two of them. They were with Professor Joseph Nyasani, who also did his PhD in philosophy in Germany. Oruka did his PhD in philosophy in Uppsala. And both were employed at the University of Nairobi, then the only university in Kenya, in 1970. And at that time, philosophy was still under the same department, philosophy, Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies. Then it split from religious studies. Then they were merged again. So now it is the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies. Actually, in 1982, H. Odera Oruka managed to separate philosophy from religious studies. But he died in 1995, and I think 2005. The administration, through the canvassing of some people, managed to remerge philosophy and religious studies. When Oruka and Nyasani were employed in the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, the people who were teaching there were mainly white people and mostly theologians as well, dominated by the Catholics and Anglicans. And the main thinking at that time among them was that black Africans were not capable of engaging in philosophy. So you can see that background. So when Oruka and Nyasani, the first black people to be trained in philosophy, were employed, they had an uphill task. First of all, to prove that they can engage in philosophy, but two, also try to encourage philosophical activities and create fora for philosophical engagement in Kenya at that time and across Africa. So the first task Oruka did was to form the Philosophical Association of Kenya in 1973. The aim or the objective then included, one, to bring people, Kenyan people together who can engage in philosophical exchanges. So they were creating a forum that can bring people, philosophers, to engage and exchange in philosophical discussions. But it didn't restrict the eligibility to philosophers, of course, because sometimes drawing a disciplinary boundary between philosophy and other disciplines become problematic. And Oruka is one of those people who believe that philosophy is not only confined to the academic formal philosophy. So the membership to the Philosophical Association of Kenya included anybody who has interest in philosophical discussion, regardless of the discipline. Of course, it required at least a graduate, a first degree. Now, so at that time, I'm just highlighting that to show that the Philosophical Association in Kenya was interested in encouraging philosophical discussion beyond philosophy as a discipline. So when Thought and Practice was formed in 1974, that is when it first published 1974, again, the guideline included not only philosophical works, but any other academic works which are interested in the social and political issues in Africa. So it was not just from its inception only focusing on Kenya, but was more to promote philosophy in Africa. And from day one, Thought and Practice engaged philosophical discussion across Africa from the first issue. But again, another interesting dimension of Thought and Practice from its own title, Thought and Practice, that it was a journal that was intended to promote application of philosophy in society. It is not just why it is Thought and Practice. How can we apply philosophy in addressing our social and political situation, in addressing society? And anybody who has read works of Oruka would see that one in 1972, when he first published his article in African philosophy, he was not trained in African philosophy, but his first article on African philosophy, where he had to engage with the works of Placid Temple, William Abraham, John S. Beatty, was in 1972. And in that article, he argues that Africa at that time, emerging from colonialism, needed a very dynamic and reflective philosophy to engage with the social conditions that Africans were facing at that time, and also to guide the trajectory where independent Africans would take. So Thought and Practice had that in mind, that Africans had to engage in philosophy and apply philosophy to critique the socio-political condition that they find themselves in. Now, interestingly, when I joined the University of Nairobi, I was a student of both Oruka and Nyasani, and both worked in the department and died in the department. Oruka died in 1995. Nyasani died in the year 2016. When I joined the university as an undergraduate, and when I was learning under Oruka, he kept on giving us some of the old issues of these journals to read about the earlier publications he made. And I remember that at that time is when I kept on reading Universitas, which was another journal from Ghana, and I think established in 1973. I think first publication must be 1973. And I was asking Ike, because I had forgotten, I also kept on reading Second Order from Nigeria. That was, I think, was established 1969, and probably first publication was 1972. And the most interesting thing about these three art journals that I read, Thought and Practice, Universitas, and Second Order, is that the people like Bodunrin, people like Wiredu, people like Ontonji, people like Oruka were publishing across these journals. And the Philosophical Association of Kenya, I think in the early 70s or early 80s, hosted Ontonji in our department, in our university, as well as Kwesi Wiredu at different times. So I'm just trying to emphasize the fact that these Thought and Practice plus other journals that were created at that time were the pioneer journals that were creating a platform for the development or the takeoff of philosophy in Africa. So Thought and Practice published, it published twice in a year biannual, and it published until I think 1982. Then somehow it became inactive. And I think until 2009, when I and two of my colleagues, Dr. Francis Owaka and Professor Reginald Odur, sat down and said, look, we need a journal, at least to be an avenue where the African philosophers can publish and exchange their philosophical ideas. But I want to imagine that it became inactive because of either resources, financial resources, and manpower to run it. So the first challenge we face is where to get the resources when we are reviving it, and how will we manage it. It is still a challenge up to now, but we managed to get to AJOL, African Journals Online, and we realized that we could publish online without paying anything. So 2009, we launched a new series for Thought and Practice, but now it is an online journal. It is open access, and it is running. We still publish twice a year, and still, I think its publication still covers the whole of Africa. Of course, dominated by contributions from Nigeria and East Africa. But why I'm saying that, when the presentation was made on Presence African, I realized that we need to rethink how to incorporate the whole of Africa in the philosophical fora and discussions, because I didn't know much. Actually, I knew Presence African as a publishing house. I didn't know it was a journal. And and when I read Placid Temple's Bantu Philosophy, then I always know it was published by Presence African. And of course, I learned today that Alexis Kagame's work was first published by Presence African. The only thing why I'm saying this is that philosophy in Africa is operating within the barriers. The Anglophone Africans hardly know what the Francophone Africans or the Portuguese-speaking Africans do. So philosophy, I don't know exactly, actually. Muntu in Crisis I got a photocopy very late in life, actually after the death of Ebusi, right? Bulaga. And I got a copy from a colleague from Mozambique. So there's still need for African philosophy to find a way of going through these language barriers so that we can engage philosophy in a more comprehensive way. I want to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. So, before the general discussion, we get some questions. Go on. Okay.
Thanks very much for this presentation, and I was very happy to listen to understand you talking about Henry Odera Oruka, one of my famous philosophical authors. And when finishing your presentation, you raised the question of barrier between regions, English part, they don't know French-speaking philosophers and so on. Have you ever think about have you or other people working in journals, have you ever think about the possibility of making a type of bilingual publication? Bilingual publication with translation, because the issue of translation is omnipresent. I don't know if you said in English omnipresent. Omnipresent, yes. So have you ever touched on this things, touch about the issue of bilingual presentation, French, English, and maybe Portuguese, even trilingual? Yes, it takes more space, it takes more work, that is sure, to translate. Maybe it costs more money, but I think it worth this effort, no? Okay.
Well, from where I stand, I have not, and we have not discussed that with my colleagues. So, but it has crossed my mind, not really in terms of a bilingual journal, but more of a coordinated collaboration in philosophical, maybe organizing a philosophical conference, or trying to coordinate the philosophical associations that would involve these other linguistic regions. But I've not thought about a bilingual or multilingual journal of philosophy, no.
Okay, thank you so much. And I want also to thank the last person. I guess the question of translation came up also in the last presentation. As somebody who at some point got involved in philosophy of translation, one realized that when translating, it's more than just, finding meaning in order to translate what maybe somebody published in English language, and it has to be translated in French or something like that, like you do in Polylog sometimes. You see it's multilingual, or maybe some text I have read, you turn the back, you see the translation of the text that you read in English. But you now realize that the meaning, you sometimes get lost. I remember an article I wrote on intercultural philosophy, and somebody contacted me from Vienna requesting for its translation. Why I rejected the translation was when I read what she translated, it was completely different from what I wanted to communicate. So I told the person, no, just leave it that way. We can write a different article that can position what I saw in the translation. So translation is not simple, but one can say allowing for authors who want to contribute in another language, making that possible. Now, there is something you said, which is one of the reasons I raised my hand. A journal without an association that promotes it doesn't usually survive. Because with an association, you can call for conferences, virtual, sometimes if you don't have resources. So, and when it is also digital, it makes it even better sometimes. So I guess most of these journals need maybe to have an association that can promote it. And secondly, I don't know whether, and the journal you presented, whether it is also possible to have it digital. Maybe it has a digital form that can make people to have access to it. And people can contribute. So you don't need 10 articles for it to be published. So you might even get 2 articles, and then it is running, okay, until maybe if you want to have a print copy. And it reduces also finances. I mean, you wouldn't need so much finance for it. Maybe these things are been tried out and it's not working, but I'm just thinking aloud. Thank you.
Is that a question? No, that was just a comment. It's
Yeah,
okay.
if you want to give the comment. Is there any other remark or question? So, if not, we thank you, Oriare.